Hello, everybody, and welcome to Lunchtime Live. We are here with Cathy Lewis from HearSay with Cathy Lewis. She's been doing the radio show for over 2 decades, thousands and thousands of episodes, tens of thousands of listeners. So we're kind of focusing our conversation today on basically how to reach all these people, talk about the difficult things going on in the world, and how to talk to these people without making anybody feel like your opinion is invalid, or just reaching a wide audience and still having everybody like you at the end of the day. But it's super relevant right now, as we all know, everything going on in the world. Me and Cathy were actually just talking before the broadcast about we're broadcasting on all these social platforms right now, and the power of these social networks, and the heads of these networks that are allowed to silence people it is a private entity, but it's also the way that people communicate. So maybe if you wanted to talk a little bit more about that, I think that's an interesting introduction to kind of what we're going into.
Sure, Shannon. Thank you very much for the invitation, by the way. If you are not aware of this, I have known Shannon for a long time because she actually started life. Well, I won't say she started life. I'll say she'll start her professional career while she was still in college, working on the radio show that I host, which is called HearSay with Cathy Lewis. If you haven't heard of that, I hope you'll stop by. We're on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 12 to 1. And so Shannon was fantastic, just a fantastic intern. Just did such a great job for us, and she's smart and capable. And she's just really doing a great job at Array. So it's just lovely to be with Shannon again. That is for sure. So we were talking right before we came on the line about the proliferation of misinformation and how that really has driven so many of the events in which we currently find ourselves, and the amplification of misinformation has been a real challenge going forward. There's no question about that. So one of the things that we were talking about is the idea that these platforms have just grown so tremendously and in reach in a very short period of time. They're incredibly influential in our lives, but they are, as Shannon noted, private enterprises. So there's only so much we can do about that in the private enterprise environment. So I suspect in the years to come, you're starting to see some of this. I think we will probably see more conversations about how we manage that as a culture, because the impacts are extraordinarily wide-reaching. So I think we will see some more of those conversations moving forward. You've seen some of the invitations for these folks to come to Congress, and I think that that may be a piece of that as well. So thanks for the question, Shannon. I tell you something. Over my career, I'm entering my 25th year, it's hard to believe, of doing this show. And when I started, all there was broadcast. I mean, that's just, there were a certain number of radio stations, certain number of TV stations, and that was it. And so just in the 25 years that I've been doing this, the change in the landscape is just extraordinary, and it's come so fast. I'm not sure we've all caught up with it.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, the instantaneous way that somebody can, just say something. I mean, even if it's correct and there's like context left out and then it morphs into this other thing, just the speed of this happening is, it's hard to deal with, and it's not for, one person to decide at all. So, it's a really interesting conversation, and just despite your viewpoints on politics, it's troubling on either side.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that we're dealing with now, as much as the platforms, is the way that the platform amplify misinformation, which is a lot of what we're dealing with right now. And it's just, I'm not quite sure how we get hold of that problem, but we do have so much of our conflict at the moment is driven by misinformation. And so I think we've got to have some real deep thought about how we manage that moving forward. And of course, the result is, as you know, we're all in our little silos with people who think and see the world like we do. And so I'm always very interested in talking with people who see the world differently than I do, because In fact, I just had a very interesting conversation on this on Twitter last night. We were talking about the fact that some of the folks who've been arrested in the Capitol Hill incursion last week, which I would call a domestic terrorism event, to be clear about that. That's how I look at that. But some of the folks who were arrested in that, many of them are being released on their own recognizance without bond. And I sort of, when I first thought about that, I thought, wow, this is some pretty heavy charges. Why would you not have bond? Why would you release people out on their own recognizance? Got into a very interesting conversation about that. And this one said, look, maybe they don't have any kind of a record. Why would we keep them from earning a living while their case is adjudicated because they have been charged, they haven't been found guilty? And I have to say that caused me to think a little bit about that. So I like talking to people who come at things in a different way, who make me reevaluate what I'm thinking. And I think that really, and to some extent, is the key to bridging the divide. It's not to be so afraid when someone sees the world differently than you do, but to get curious about that and ask them, why do you think that? What a question I like to ask people is, how did you come to look at that issue that way? Not how did you come to believe that, because that sort of suggests that maybe they're not believing something that you think is correct, but how did you come to that conclusion about this problem or this issue? And that way you get to hear sometimes it's people's life experience, which opens a very interesting conversation. Sometimes it's the information they're consuming, which may be misinformation, in which case you have an opportunity to offer some different sources. But I always think if you can get curious about a thing, that really is a great way to engage people who may look at the world differently than you do.
Completely. I mean, with everything, especially like everything happening right now in the past year, it's hard not to like inject your feelings into it. And a lot of on both sides, everything going on is like, it's just so, angry or sad or just like, it's an emotional things, and it's hard to kind of keep your feelings and your personal beliefs out of, the facts of the situation. So that's definitely.
And a piece of that, Shannon, is because the stakes are very high. We're talking about very important things right now. And one of the things that I've sort of evolved my thinking on over time is, from working on the show, ever since I first started doing the show, I have been a big proponent of civility. I was talking about that 25 years ago and continue to do that every year. That's kind of part of my brand promise. I do think in the moment we find ourselves, particularly after this last year, when we've had this reckoning around social justice issues, I do think we have to ask ourselves candidly, where we are on these issues. And there will be times when we will find ourselves in a position of having to draw a line and saying, I've had to do that some this year, and it's painful. But I've had to say to some people, look, I feel very strongly about this. I do not believe you are informed by information that is accurate. From a human perspective, I cannot agree with you on these issues. So we're going to stay in relationship, but we're going to talk about other things until we can get past this. I think being vulnerable about where you are on this stuff is really important. And I encourage leaders to do that too. Leaders, I think, are sometimes very frightened of this social media or social reckoning moment. They know they have to be making statements about it because you see this. A lot of corporations are making these statements that seem to come out of nowhere on issues of social justice because they feel like they have to do that. But that has to be authentic. And it seems to me that one of the things that leaders can do is to be very vulnerable with their staff about where they are on this. If you don't understand what this movement is about, then you can educate yourself, because it is definitely a thing, and begin to open conversations with your staff and your colleagues and say, I don't know everything I need to know about this. I would love to know and understand more. Those are really interesting and intriguing one-on-one conversations that you can have that can change you as a leader and can make you a more effective leader in this really crucial moment in our national history.
Definitely. I think that's a great point. And it's, you did mention about you've been, doing this show for almost 25 years. I think it'll be 25 years this year, right?
This fall, that's right.
Yep. Okay. And I guess obviously things are so different, but I guess what's kind of a couple of things that stand out to you that have been the most different? Especially we've been talking a lot about the speed at which information changes and how quickly things change.
That's such a great question, Shannon. I'll tell you, when we started the show, it was 1996. So as I like to say, we started it in the last century, but at that time, we just had a radio show. Well, certainly we had email, but social media was just not a force in 1996 like it is now. So what's happened over time is, it used to be you would pay attention to what guests you booked on the show, and you want to obviously create a good conversation in that, and then what the callers bring to the show. So that was all we really had to focus on at that point. With the advent of social media, I would tell you, I think that takes just as much time and energy to deal with as the actual show does. I wish I could tell you we had the double of the staff to do that. We don't. As many media organizations are, we're sort of really stressed on that point. But the social media becomes just as important. Why is that? Well, because people, unlike back in the day, you might get a phone call from somebody who would say, if they didn't like what you had said or like a guest or whatever, they had some sort of issue with the show, they would say, hey, Cathy, listen, I love your show. I love that conversation on XYZ, but I felt like this conversation was missing a voice. And maybe next time you talk about it, you could invite DEF to join. You'd be like, oh, okay, great, that's fantastic. Today, if you say something that people do not like, first of all, they are going to call you out, question your parentage. They start loaded for bear. They start with assumptions about who you are, what you believe, and who you're working on behalf of. It's very hostile. I won't say it's very hostile. It sometimes has a very hostile bent to it. And I think that's because we have not created, an environment has been created in which people are very suspicious and hostile to media. And I can tell you, I am seeing that. In the last couple of years, the tone and tenor of the communication is really inappropriately strong and hostile. That's not everybody, but as you know, I don't know how you are about these things, Shannon. Some people tell me I'm doing something good, and one person tells me I'm not. I'm going to really focus on that one person. I acknowledge that as a personal fault. But what happens is these are not just, hey, next time you do this, could you tell me? They're very strong. They have a lot of suspicion about why you do a thing and where you're doing it. I had somebody tell me one time that this was clearly part of a media conspiracy. And I said to this person, look, I've worked in newsrooms all my life, and I'm telling you they're the most disorganized place. We could not coordinate a conspiracy. Let me just tell you that. That would be impossible for us to do. And then that kind of took the edge off a little bit. But people assume intent. And that's the other thing I tell people in the workshops and consulting I do with corporations is that is almost an underlying given now, is that people assume intent where none may exist. So as individuals, we need to pay attention to that. But as leaders, we also, need to pay attention to that and sort of address that at the top.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like there's I don't know. I guess like we talked about earlier, like all these feelings and stuff. It's like people just assume now that you have to go one way or the other. It's because there's alternative facts now. So
I think people are. It's interesting, Shannon. I hadn't thought about it that way. That's a really interesting point. That we are almost being sort of pushed to take a position on things. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, there's really the middle ground is like lesser and lesser these days.
Yes, that's right. Extremism is ruling the day right now, and that's unfortunate because if you are all one way or all the other, you have very little chance of talking to folks in the middle. I had a political consultant tell me one time, and this has really been something I've applied in a lot of areas of life. I had a political consultant tell me one time that out of 100% of people, 25% will love you no matter what, 25% will hate you no matter what. The middle 50%, you have 25% who leans toward loving you and 25% that leans toward hating you. And where you want to focus your energy is on the 25% who are leaning toward loving you, because those are the people you can probably influence. You're not going to influence the people on either extreme. People who love you are going to love you no matter what. And the people who hate you are going to hate you no matter what. People who are leaning to hating you, why would you waste your energy there when you could focus on the people who are leaning to love you? So, I don't know. I think that's a very powerful way to think about it. And that's what I try to do in the work that I do, is just remind myself that, even the people who are being hostile, as they can be from time to time, are listening, right? So you have to figure they're leaning hopefully to loving. And if they don't, then maybe they go listen to something else. And goodness knows there's lots to listen to these days. That's the other thing I think that's changed about the environment, is we have a lot of competition now. And I think competition, for me, I think competition makes us better. But we are also running the risk of really splintering the audience. And the good part about that is, if you have a niche interest or, a niche idea or something you're really intrigued by, you can find a community of people who are on that same train with you and talk to them and engage them in those circles, which didn't used to be the case. So I think that's one of the very positive things that has resulted from the proliferation of podcasts and cable news and all the rest of it. There's a lot more variety now than there was.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Obviously there's a lot of really bad corners of the internet and, things brewing, like, QAnon stuff and stuff like that. But there's also that same kind of form is people that might have had like a weird hobby or something. Now they can easily find those other people,
mm-hmm.
or, people can easily launch their own platform with like very low budget. Like, for example, this program, StreamYard we're using right now, we're doing a whole broadcast, which, you have a radio studio and like a producer and, a sound guy and all that. But this, you can kind of obviously it's not as high quality, but, it gets the point across, and it's a great start. Like, it's nice that people can kind of just start their own way and don't have to invest a lot in there.
I didn't know anything about this platform, and I'm so glad you introduced me to it, because what this does for people is it lowers the barriers of entry. And I'll tell you, I love the show. I love the show, but there's other stuff I want to talk about. There's other stuff I want to say. And so I've been sort of tooling around with trying to do a podcast, which I hope to get off the ground this quarter. But all of these opportunities are so great because they give somebody who has things to say or, ideas to promulgate, they give you more options to do that than having to work hard to get an hour every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So I'm very appreciative of these formats.
Yeah, I guess I know you've been trying to do the podcast for a while.
Yeah.
And after so long at the show, it's kind of like, okay, like, this is awesome, love it. Kind of, what's next?
That's exactly where I am in my professional life and my personal life too, to some extent. I realize I'm thinking more about some things than I ever have before, and I love doing the show, and I think it's a good service to the community. And I'm very proud of the work that we do. I'm very proud of our team that works hard every day. Paul Bebo and Jonah Grinkowitz and our audio engineer, Todd Washburn. We're a fantastic team, and I love what we do. But there are other things I want to say, other ideas I want to get across, people that I run into that I think wouldn't be necessarily appropriate for the whole of Hampton Roads audiences, but for people who may like the way I have a conversation, they might be really interested in that. And so, I'm really excited about it. I will tell you, one of the things I so appreciate about your generation and about younger generations is they are not afraid to try things. And I think one of the, I'm entering a big, I'm in a much later decade in life. And I think I won't speak for everybody, I'll say I. Sometimes we get afraid to try a thing because we can't put it out of the blocks perfectly. And I think that has been a real issue I have dealt with on this podcast, is the idea that it has to be perfect because we do a really high quality show every day. And I don't want people to think, wow, she did that on her own and that sounded terrible. But what I love about this moment, and what I have to keep reminding myself is, we've discovered over the last 10 months of dealing with COVID-19 that everybody can talk from their homes. The interview you never would have scheduled on a network show before because you weren't able to bring them into the studio and get the lighting right and all the rest of it. We are so used to Zoom interviews now that I find that very exciting because it kind of lowers my anxiety around coming out of the blocks in a perfect way. So I battle that. I will freely acknowledge that. I battle that every day. So if I can get myself over that hump this quarter, we're going to put that podcast on the air, perfect or not. Not on the air, on the stream. See, this
on the stream, on the internet.
On the interwebs, right.
On people's phones, how it works. So I guess basically for the podcast, you kind of want to broaden the conversation, maybe talk, outside of Hampton Roads things or what's happening. So. Yes.
And the other thing I want to do, because I really feel strongly about this, Shannon, I have this firm belief that each one of us can change. We may not look. I can't do anything about insurrection in Washington, D.C., but I sure can do something about my corner of the world. And that's one thing I've always felt very strongly about. And I've sort of tried to incorporate that into my brand, is the idea that, people need to bloom where they're planted. We can change the world around us, and that changes the larger ecosystem. So I'm really interested in talking with people who are doing that, who are living here in Hampton or in another community, and just doing something on their own that's making a change to the world around them that has the potential to catch fire and improve things. Because I just firmly believe that until we create a situation where we're working together towards something, that can really break down a lot of barriers.
Totally, yeah. I was curious, we were talking a little bit before we started about kind of your bullet points of keeping the conversation bipartisan without, compromising your beliefs, which kind of what we're focusing the conversation on today. So yeah, I'm curious what you're thinking with those, if you want to share.
Sure, I'd be happy to. The main thing I would suggest is to get curious about the people that you're talking to. Don't assume that you know what their beliefs are. Don't assume that you know how they came to those beliefs. Really get curious and talk to people. You will find the most fascinating things in people's backstories that will cause you to perhaps not agree with the conclusion that they came to, but certainly to understand how they got there, if that makes sense. So certainly to have respect for the journey that took them to that place, right? So that's one thing. My husband was telling me he has he's read this book from a man whose father was just an avowed white supremacist 40 years ago. And this young man grew up in his household, and he believed that until he got to college. He had an experience in college that changed his mind, and he just spent the rest of his life, trying to undo what he views as the damage that his father did. And his father's work was inspirational to Timothy McVeigh. So I would argue that his work, has done damage. Now, that's something, if I saw his name, I wouldn't know that backstory. If he said he was interested in this issue, unless I asked, I wouldn't know that his father was the author of a book that white supremacists use as one of their Bibles. I mean, what an amazing transformative story that is. So I think if you ask people what brings them to the work they do, what brings them to the beliefs they have, that can really be helpful in bridging that gap. Everybody likes to talk about themselves too, so that's a really easy question to ask people. The other thing I tell people is please just suspend your disbelief. We are so prone now to say, Oh, I know how you feel about that. I know it. I don't even need to hear it. And one of the things that we do on the radio show to kind of try to get past this is that when we have candidate conversations, you know this, Shannon, from working on them, when we have candidate conversations, we do not identify the candidates by their party. We just say, here's Jane Smith. She wants to be the next city councilor, whatever it is. Because what happens is people hear, well, he's a Democrat, so I'm not going to listen, or he's a Republican, so I'm not going to listen. They don't listen to what comes after that. So we try to kind of take the labels out of it so people can really listen. And I'll tell you the effect of that is that I have had calls from people who said, I thought I was going to vote for that guy. I heard him and I realized I am not going to vote for that guy. And the opposite thing has happened as well. So we do, by the end of the conversation, let them know, so they can identify them and find them. But we really want people to listen to what they're saying. And I think that's extraordinarily valuable. The other thing I tell people is, I'm telling you this because it is the truth. People will always reveal themselves in conversation. They will always tell you who they are. All you have to do is ask them questions, sit back and listen. I promise you, they will reveal who they are. No question about it. And then finally, one of the things I like to say to people is keep the bridge open. I know this is painful right now for a lot of people. I know people who are in so much pain right now, particularly around COVID-19. They may believe one thing about the value of masks and being careful and all that, and their family may believe another thing. And I know people who have had to just say, look, right now, I can't deal with you right now. Sometimes you have to do that, for your own health for a period of time, but keep the bridge open, because in a different time when things are better, you can really reestablish that relationship. So that's the other thing I'd say. We are at a moment of tension in this country like I don't think I've seen in 25 years. I really can't remember a time where we have been tense on so many fronts. I mean, we have a pandemic that is threatening us. We have political unrest. We have social justice issues. I mean, there's just a lot coming at us. And so this is a time where for your own health, you may need to take a step back, or as you deal with other people, just to kind of take a deep breath and bear that in mind, and come at it with a little grace is really important. And there are people right now who are changing long-held beliefs. And the way to deal with that is not to say, well, I told you so, but to be gracious as people grow and change. I think that's really important too.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's just, listening and asking questions and being open to hearing people and not just shutting them down immediately.
Yeah.
It sounds simple, but it's harder than you think,
It's much harder than you think, and particularly in this environment. So, I would say you don't have to be in every conversation. Twitter does not demand that you respond. I have to remind myself of that from time to time, too. The idea that nobody says you have to engage in every social media conversation. I discovered that in a conversation with soccer mom from Topeka, right? And I was trying to argue her down on this point of policy. And then I realized soccer mom from Topeka is something I will never meet in my real life. I need to bless her and send her on her way, say, thank you so much. It's been a lovely conversation. And then I need to have face-to-face conversations with people, because those are the ones I'm in relationship with. There's nothing wrong with, posting your thoughts on Twitter. I don't mean that. But you're not going to change. I'm never going to change soccer mom in Topeka's mind about anything.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, sometimes the best thing to say is just nothing at all, I mean, sometimes it's not worth your energy.
No, we all have our thoughts and ideas. One of the things that, I've had these conversations, which have been very good. This conversation I had last night, we talked about a lot of interesting things from a conversation that I started because I really wasn't happy these guys were out on bond. It made me think. And so at the end, I wrote back to all these three people that were in this conversation. I said, hey, I just want to say I really appreciate this. You opened my mind to some different possibilities. I'm looking at this differently. And I consider that to be a good day. And so thank you so much for engaging this conversation. And they all said the same things. It was very valuable, really enjoyed it. Are we all holding hands and singing Kumbaya? Maybe not, but we respect each other. We got an opportunity to think our positions through a little bit. That's a good day.
I totally agree. I think the another important thing to remember, I mean, that gets people so heated, and what makes this divide even farther apart is, I mean, I remember when this stuff was happening at the Capitol, I was like, I was trying to work, but I was just like on Twitter, I was like I can't stop. And just stopping the doom scroll, I think, is a very crucial thing. I'll post a link in the comments, but I did a podcast for our daily podcast journey to 100 million.
I love that podcast, by the way. I'm so glad you mentioned it.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, the Eric and Kevin combo on that is amazing.
And sometimes when we would, when they would be running out of episodes, I was like, I'll throw a couple in. And one was just about kind of stopping the scroll and being aware of your mental health, not checking your phone in the morning, right when you wake up, and, setting screen limits so you're not on it all day. Keeping routines like meditation, or just have your coffee on the couch with no phone, and maybe sometimes I'll have to just keep it away while I'm working and block stuff on my browser so I don't get distracted, because it's really easy to just get lost in that, and then
so easy
jump in these conversations that are just it's a real boxing match. So I think that's.
I'm so glad you said that, because I think between the events of last Wednesday, I mean, I had a meeting that day at 4:00, and I remember getting on the call and saying, thinking in my head, my God, I can't believe we're doing a call on anything. Our Capitol is getting ransacked. How in the world can we focus on it? But I'm thinking this is sort of in my internal process. And then finally somebody said, I just got to say, it's really bad stuff going on. And we were able to talk about it. And then, it was a very helpful moment just to recognize that. And I'm so glad you said that, because we are at the moment in the pandemic, I think, where it's really, it is really worse than it was in, March, April, May time frame in terms of what's going on. I mean, somebody was saying this yesterday, and I didn't know anybody who really had COVID in the spring. I know lots of people now who do. So that is a lot to deal with. And I think and the weather's cold, there's all kinds of stuff going on. But I think you're so right that we have to really pay attention to our own mental health and take breaks as we can. And maybe we alter our work days a bit. But I think that's really important, Jen. And I'm so glad you said that.
Definitely. Well, yeah, we're about getting to that time. Let's see, what are we doing? I think somebody's commenting, but let's see. Somebody at Array Digital said, I made a website with a Facebook Lite platform using PHP. Within weeks, I had commenters spewing all sorts of things. If you don't have the resources to police your own site, it becomes a mess.
I think that is correct. That is 100. And I can tell you that because I have, what do I have, 4,500 close and intimate friends on my Facebook page or whatever it is. If you cannot get in there and monitor it and set the standards that you want to set, that is a very distinct possibility. And I share that experience. Definitely. And then the next one says, you talked about search engines censoring. I love this platform, by the way, Shannon. This is so much fun.
Right.
Don't censor website URLs themselves. Anyone watching after a YouTube tutorial can build their own platform to speak freely. I can't even figure out the platforms that are currently out there. So if you can do that, you have my undying respect and admiration. That is so impressive. I'm so afraid I'm going to push the wrong button and it will be irretrievable. That's my own personal psychosis, but there it is. Yeah, that's really interesting. And we probably, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how we begin to engage this in recognizing some of the media functions of these platforms and processes. That's going to be really interesting moving forward. And I heard somebody the other day advocate for the return of the fairness doctrine. And I think that was gone before you were even born, Shannon. But the fairness doctrine was eliminated, I think, in the early 80s. And basically it required, this was from the day when all we had was television and radio, and it required television and radio news programs or stations in order to get their licenses, they had to present opposing points of view. If they did something that took one position, they were legally required to present another point of view. So that was an interesting conversation the other day, because I haven't heard about the fairness doctrine in so long, and somebody was saying we really
brought it back up. Yeah, I think one thing to note about this question too is we saw it over the weekend with Parler, which, you know, they were trying to do exactly what I think this question is addressing. Like, hey, we are, you know, we're not Twitter, we're not Facebook, we're not tied down by these like corporate entities. Like, we're just here as, you know, the, you know, totally free speech platform. And what happened though is after everything happened last week, people were like, you know, forget Facebook and Twitter, let's go to Parler, and their systems crashed. So if you don't have the infrastructure, I mean, the reason that Twitter and Facebook function the way they do is their infrastructure and the amount of servers and like people they have putting out fires, I'm sure every, you know, few hours at least, with like, you know, billions of users. And that's the thing too, billions of users. I mean, the influence that, yes, you can make your own third-party platform, but, you know, if tree falls down in a forest, nobody's around to hear it, doesn't make a sound. You know, your audience there is so limited. And so, you know, people want to be on Twitter and Facebook because that's where people are. So,
you know, that Parler thing you raised is a really interesting point, because if I understood that correctly, and again, this is not something that's my expertise at all, but in some cases, didn't the platforms say we're not going to host you anymore? Or
and that's another thing is, so the server, as I understand it, the servers, I didn't really know too much about Parler, but before all this stuff, but the way I understand it is the shift happened and their servers were crashing. And then I think as they were starting to get them back up, you know, Amazon, I guess they're hosted by Amazon Web Services.
Yeah.
And basically Amazon was like, we're not going to host your URL anymore. And shut down the website completely. So, and
we have a comment on that that I think is a very interesting one. If Parler was using databases from Amazon servers, if Parler spent millions of dollars to buy their own servers, they wouldn't be having the issues. So that's interesting too. I mean, I love when people get upset about Twitter and Facebook, and I just want to say, well, do pick up your refund at the door, because I'm sure and it's like, oh, wait, you didn't pay anything? Oh, okay. Because, you know, that's a piece of this, you know, that's a piece of this as well. I mean, what expectations can we have of something that is free to use? I think all of these questions are going to really come to us in interesting ways over the next year. Like Alan says, Parler was hosted on Amazon, who turned off their account for violating.
So, you know, there's always something on the top of there's something above on the top of the rig. So even you could start your own third party, you know, Twitter, but A, what power and influence does it hold? B, who's listening and who's going to be on that? And C, how can you sustain it without, you know, millions of dollars of servers?
Yeah.
So I think
the other point that someone made earlier about you wouldn't want to be liable for something that somebody said.
Definitely.
You know, that comes back to this issue of clear terms of service, so that I run this, that was a terrible thing I almost said, because I don't do it. I started this Facebook group called Mask Friendly Businesses in Hampton Roads. And I truly started it just as a lark back in March, just to see if anybody was going in places that were really doing a great job and they could share that. Well, of course, you know, I mean, I really thought it was going to be 30 people, you know, talking about this. Well, it grew. We now have 3,250 people, and these wonderful moderators who volunteered to moderate the thing. So when I say I look at it, but I don't moderate it anymore because they're volunteering to do a great job on that. It's amazing. We had to be very clear about our terms of service. You know, what were we going to put in that space? What were we going to put off? They are very rigorous about, you know, 2 strikes and you're out. And, you know, so I think that's the other thing. You have to have a really robust strategy to manage commentary. You really do.
Yeah, I mean, that's that's funny that you bring that up, because that's kind of one of, I mean, obviously I work in social media and I have to have a Facebook, but one of the reasons I like to use it personally is the Facebook groups are really nice. I'm obviously really into plants. And so we're in a 757, shout out to 757 plant group. But they, they have thousands of members. This is a plant group and it was getting hostile. Like they had to get more moderators for a plant group. So it just goes to show, I mean, whether it's politics or plants or anything, like people's opinions. And I think a big thing about it too is that opinions are being typed out and you're not hearing like the tone of the voice that people are saying in, and like that's being misconstrued. So there's just like, along with all the misinformation, it's just
one of the things I do in these I do a lot of consulting and workshops on communications and engaged workplaces and that sort of thing. And one of the things I do is I put on the screen this sentence: I didn't say she stole the money, period. Now, see, I said that, no inflection on any particular word. But then we talk about it as a group, and there's, that's a sentence. So if you write that out, you can write that out. But depending on where you put the emphasis in that sentence, you can get a ton of different interpretations. And that's what we use as kind of an example of what you just said, Shannon, the idea that you got to really be clear if you're in these places when you're being sarcastic or when you're kidding or when you're really serious, because you have to remember you are talking to a wide universe of people who don't know your facial expressions or anything else.
I forget exactly what it's called, but I saw this thing where it was like a tag list, and I'm sure you've seen like /S for sarcasm, but it was like a whole group of like basically like tonal tags that you can use on like
I would
Twitter.
love to see that, because I that's one thing, and I'm the one who's spelling it out. I am being sarcastic here.
Yeah, so like /S, I see that a lot about Twitter. I would have to find it. I don't know exactly what it was called, but I just thought that was really interesting. And so it's just, I mean, just as the show I produced to you about digital communication, it's always shifting, and it's very interesting to see, and just gotta take that into consideration when we're talking to our audiences, when they're talking to us. Just make your tone clear.
Yes. And
understand that the way they're coming off might not be how they mean. Maybe get in a DM and go into it deeper if they're being in a pocket on your platform. Like, just
a great point.
Talking.
I just see this note here. I think this is a really interesting thing that we're starting to see more of now, which is, and the comment is, I see digital space in the real world, so that if you rent a co-working space to a hate group, then it is very possible that somebody will say, hey, get out of here. We're not going to tolerate this. I think this is so important because we are increasingly in a moment where people are judging owners of things. People are judging people people are judging you by your association, is how I would put that. So I think we're going to see more of this. I think we're absolutely going to see more of it, and I think you're already starting to see that with some of the contemporary points. That we're facing. I mean, we have to be as good as our word, and we have to be as good as our brand. So if we're out there in the community saying, oh, we don't believe in hate and discontent, and yet we have somebody who's purveying hate and discontent renting space from us, literally or figuratively, that's something we all have to really monitor to make sure that our brand is consistent, that we're
definitely
walking, talking that talk.
I mean, that was a huge thing this past summer with, Black Lives Matter. Just,
yes.
We put out a statement at HearSay about it, and a lot of people did. And I saw like Gushers wrote a statement, like the little snack, like, okay. But, just you can say it, and you just got to have, the the bite behind your bark. Like, you got to have action behind your words. Like, okay, we understand what you're saying. It's kind of this point now. It's not about, it is about solidarity, but if it's insincere, it's useless. So I think that's a great point too. So
I think it was really important for all these companies to come out and make that statement. I do. So for many companies, it was the first time they had ever sort of ventured into that space. And I think they were right to see that as a watershed moment. But now, months on, I think employees and customers and the public and all these other folks are going to be looking for ways that you live into that promise or live into that statement that you've made. So, I think that can only help us. That can only advance the conversation.
Yeah, speaking of conversation, my boss, Kevin, spot on, Cathy.
Talk about your boss, Kevin. Take his call, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. So, they, him and Eric say all the time, if you got to get something done, you want it done. I don't know about, you don't, we're going to come off wrong, or because sorry, there's like a motorcycle.
Yeah, no worries.
If you get several emails about one thing, it could come off a little, a little abrasive, or but if you pick up the phone, hey, sorry to bother you, I had kind of emailed you this a few times. I know you're busy, but let's just knock it out right now. So not only can it help with the tone, but it can help just get it done and get everything out there and just figure everything out, which I think is metaphorical to the grander conversation of, just talking to people about political issues, societal issues, stuff like that. So I think it's a good philosophy either way.
That's such a great point. And I'm reminded that, one of the things we observe in sort of office or organizational behavior is, when you keep going around a thing on email, it's time to stop it and meet and get in a room and talk about it. And, a similar thing is certainly true in client relationships, which is, I remember, this hasn't been all that long ago, I had a situation that I just stewed about. I just was convinced that the client was very unhappy with me, and I was anxious about it, and there had been an email come across, and I was like, yikes, that just doesn't sound like the customary way this person usually communicates. So finally, I screwed up my courage and called, and it turned out they were having an issue in their personal life, which was very challenging. And, they were trying to deal with that and do work. And so, obviously they just didn't have time for all the little nice things that we do in email to communicate our intent and our feeling about that. And I realized two things. One is what a waste of my imagination I had allowed myself to get into, thinking that there was a problem here without getting in there and trying to figure it out. And two, how much I was able to understand and appreciate that client situation when I was aware that there was something that was very distracting and very important going on in a completely different area of that person's life that was affecting that process. And so I was able to say, hey, well, I'll be glad to help you with X, Y, and Z. And the person said, great, I would really appreciate that. And it really, I think, strengthened the relationship. I wish I'd done it sooner, and I wish I hadn't wasted so much imagination thinking that there was a problem. But Kevin is so right. Getting on the phone, and just the tone makes a huge difference.
Definitely. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's kind of a great way to, end this conversation, whether it's, business relationships or, personal relationships, having hard conversations with family. If you do it in person or on the phone or on a Zoom call, you see their face, you hear their voice, nothing can be misconstrued. And it's more personal. It's more personal, and it's just a better way to do things. And I think you brought up another great point. We all got stuff going on.
Right? Tough moment. Shannon, I really appreciate this conversation. First of all, it always makes me so happy when I see people who came through our show at a phase in life just go on and define themselves and contribute in such meaningful ways. And even if your boss were not on the line, I would tell you that they made a great choice in hiring you and all the work that you're doing. And I very much appreciate this conversation. And if you want me to come back another time, I'm very happy to do that. If you didn't like something I said, please be kind about it. But you can. Do you mind if I just tell people my website in case they want to?
Sure. Yeah.
It's so easy. It's CathyLewis.com. CathyLewis.com. And apparently there are many other Cathy Lewises in the world, and so I'm very glad I got the original website.
Oh yeah, that is a good move. Yeah, I remember just like Googling, and there's like an actress named Cathy Lewis too, and I was like,
a 1940s comedy actress. Yeah, I have her picture in my office because my goal is to get my Google things so that I'm the first thing that comes up and not her. Love her, but come on.
But girl, you had your moment. It's my moment. It's my time now.
Right. Thanks, Shannon. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much. It was so great talking to you again. It feels like it's come full circle, and I loved turning on your show, and it again gave me a lot of great experience to do this job and help out with the live stream, and the broadcasting things I learned there have helped me throughout everything. So yeah, if you all Cathy has her HearSay with Cathy Lewis is on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, noon to 1 on WHRO 89.5. Got her website down there, CathyLewis.com. You can access both of those in the comments. Oops, I typed that wrong. I missed the E. Dang it. Live stream. That's what happens. That's what happens on live streams. But yeah, all right. So I'm going to end it here, and we'll see y'all next week.
Thank you, friend.
Thank you so much, Cathy.
Thank you.